Hey, old man, sing for us. If you're good, maybe you'll order dinner tonight.
He walked into the party as a joke. He walked out as the only honest person in the room. And the man who invited him, one of the most powerful real estate developers in the country, didn't sleep for 3 days after what happened at that microphone. Nobody planned for the truth that night. Not the guests, not the staff, and definitely not the man who thought he was in control of everything. But some truths don't wait for permission. Rexton Hale was 47 years old and had never lost a negotiation in his life. That was the story people told about him. That was the story he told himself. His name appeared on towers, waterfront developments, luxury hotel chains, and private land deals that stretched across 6 states. He had started with nothing, a rented apartment, a borrowed laptop, and a name nobody recognized, and he had built everything from scratch. That was what his profile said. That was what every magazine article had printed for the last decade. What the articles didn't say was what he had sacrificed to get there, and what he had been told so he would stop asking questions. 8 years ago, Rexton Hale had been a different man. He had a wife. Her name was Jade. She was the only person in his life who looked at him without calculating something first. She didn't want access. She didn't want favors. She didn't even want him to change. She just wanted him present, which, in the end, turned out to be the one thing he was worst at giving. Then one night, she was gone. Car accident, he was told. Wet roads. No other vehicles. No witnesses. The call came from his mother while he was in the middle of a business dinner. He remembered leaving the restaurant. He remembered standing outside in the rain. He didn't remember much after that. The funeral was closed casket. His mother, Noreen, handled everything. Documents, arrangements, the burial, all of it done before Rexton had even finished grieving the first week. He never questioned it. He never asked to see anything. He was too hollowed out to function, and Noreen had always been the kind of woman who managed things quietly and efficiently. So he let her manage it. And then he did what Rexton Hale always did when something hurt too deep to face. He worked. More deals. More buildings. More nights in conference rooms instead of bedrooms. The money grew. The name grew. And slowly, without him noticing, the grief didn't disappear. It just changed shape. It became something harder, colder, a quiet certainty that people were predictable, that emotion was a liability, and that control was the only thing worth having. He began testing people. Not cruelly, but deliberately. He would put guests in uncomfortable situations at dinners just to see who lied first. He would drop false information in meetings and watch who repeated it. He found a kind of entertainment in it. A way to feel something when nothing else broke through. It became a habit. That habit is what started the night that changed everything. It was a Saturday. The kind of Saturday Rexton's team spent 3 weeks preparing for. His estate sat elevated above the city, glass and stone and clean lines, lit from every angle. Luxury cars filled the curved driveway. Valets moved with practice speed. Inside, the evening was exactly what it was designed to be, controlled. Crystal overhead. Soft live music. Wine that cost more per bottle than most people's rent. Every guest selected, every detail arranged. Rexton stood near the center of the room, drink in hand, watching. His closest friend, Briggs, leaned toward him. "You've got that look again." "What look?" "The one that means you're about to do something nobody asked you to do." Rexton didn't answer. His eyes had moved toward the front gate. Just beyond the iron frame, under a dim streetlight, stood a man. Old, thin. His jacket hung loose on his frame like it had been borrowed from someone larger. Gray hair, uncombed. He was holding a small cardboard sign, but he wasn't waving it, wasn't calling out. He was just standing there, watching the house. Still, patient, like he had been waiting for a while. Briggs followed Rexton's gaze. "Well, that's interesting." Rexton turned his glass slowly in his fingers. Briggs smiled slowly. "You thinking what I'm thinking? Say it. Bring him in." Briggs nodded toward the old man. "Seat him at a table. Say nothing. Just watch what happens." A long pause. "Do it," Rexton said. Within minutes, 2 security staff were walking down the driveway. They spoke to the old man briefly. He listened. He nodded. He followed them without argument. They gave him a clean shirt, a jacket that didn't quite fit, shoes slightly too large. But none of it hid where he came from. That was the point. When he entered the main hall, the room didn't stop. Not at first. But one by one, heads turned. Conversations lowered. A woman shifted her chair back. A man near the window frowned and looked away. Someone else caught Rexton's eye as if waiting for an explanation. The old man was seated at a center table, visible from almost every angle in the room. Rexton watched every reaction, every tightened jaw, every glance exchanged behind raised glasses. Briggs was barely holding back amusement, but the old man did something that Rexton didn't expect. He sat like he belonged there. No nervousness, no looking around, no fidgeting with the silverware or staring at the food. He simply sat, hands resting on the table, eyes calm, as if this was not the strangest place he had ever found himself. Rexton noticed that. He noticed it immediately. Minutes passed. Then the evening's host stepped to the microphone to invite any guests who wished to say a few words. A routine tradition at events like this, safe and predictable. Rexton paid it little attention, until the old man stood up. Slowly, calmly, he pushed his chair back and walked toward the front of the room. Briggs stopped smiling. Wait! The room grew quieter. Not all at once. Gradually, like something invisible had moved through it. The old man reached the microphone. He placed both hands on the podium and said nothing for several seconds. He looked at the room. He looked at the guests. He looked at Rexton. And then he spoke. "My name," he said, his voice carrying without effort, "is Walter Greer." Rexton's expression didn't move, but something inside him did, because that name was familiar. He couldn't place it. Not yet. But something about it snagged in his chest like fabric on a nail. Then the old man said his next sentence. "I once lived in a house like this one." The room went still. Walter Greer stood at the microphone with the stillness of someone who had rehearsed this moment for years and was no longer afraid of it. "I once owned companies," he said. "Properties. Contracts. I hosted rooms full of people just like this, where everyone smiled and pretended things were fine." A few guests shifted. Briggs leaned toward Rexton. "What is this?" Rexton didn't answer. He was listening. "I believed something back then," Walter continued. "I believed that money showed you who people really were." A pause. "I thought wealth revealed character." His eyes moved across the room slowly, and then stopped directly on Rexton. "I was wrong." The words landed heavier than they should have. "Money doesn't reveal who people are," Walter said quietly. "It hides it." He tapped the podium once. "Because when there's money, people behave. They shake your hand. They say what you want to hear. They smile at dinners like this one." Another pause. "But take it away, and then you see the truth." Rexton's heartbeat felt slower, heavier, because this had stopped being entertainment several sentences ago. Walter reached into his coat pocket. He pulled out the small cardboard sign he had been holding outside. He placed it face down on the podium. "I stood outside your gate tonight," he said, "not because I needed food." A pause. "Because I needed to see what kind of man you had become." Rexton's jaw tightened, almost imperceptible. But Walter saw it. Walter turned the sign over. The visible side read in rough handwriting, "I'm hungry." Then he flipped it again. The back side, smaller letters, steadier hand, "I remember." The room inhaled. Rexton's stomach dropped, because something about those two words felt targeted, personal, aimed directly at something he couldn't yet name. Walter's eyes locked onto his. "You don't recognize me, do you?" Rexton didn't answer, but inside, his mind was already running, searching, pulling at threads. Walter nodded slowly, as if he expected that. "That's all right," he said. "It took me a long time to find you too." A murmur moved through the room. Confusion. Curiosity. Something electric. 8 years ago, Walter said, you stopped visiting a certain neighborhood. Rexton's breath caught. Just once. Just barely. "That neighborhood," Walter said softly. "The one you came from." Briggs turned sharply. "What is he saying?" Rexton's face didn't move. but his eyes were no longer calm. There was a house there, Walter continued. Old paint, a porch with a broken step, a wind chime that never stopped, no matter how still the air was. He let that sit. A woman lived there, and a man who used to visit her, who promised her he would always come back. The room felt like it had stopped breathing. Walter's voice dropped. One day he didn't. The silence that followed was absolute. No movement, no whispers. Rexton finally spoke. His voice low, controlled. What do you want? Walter almost smiled, but it wasn't amusement. It was something older, something tired. Not what you think, he said. I didn't come here for money. A pause. I didn't come here for revenge. Another pause. I came here to finish a story you were never allowed to hear. Rexton's chest tightened, because now there was no more pretending this was entertainment. This was something else, something he had buried. After you left, Walter said. She didn't disappear. Rexton's mind went still. She didn't die. Someone in the room gasped quietly. Briggs turned fully toward Rexton. What? But Rexton didn't react outwardly, because inwardly everything had just fractured. Walter continued. She waited. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. And then, his voice softened. She stopped waiting. A long pause. But she wasn't alone. The room held. She had a child. And then Walter said the words. A boy with your eyes. Rexton didn't move. Not because he was calm. Because his body had forgotten what to do with what it had just heard. Briggs was saying something beside him. The room was a blur of sound. But none of it reached him because his mind had gone somewhere else entirely. Back 8 years. Back to a closed casket and a rushed funeral and his mother's calm voice telling him everything had been taken care of. The way she hadn't let him see Jade one final time. The way she had moved so efficiently through his grief. Walter's voice reached him again through the noise. You were told she died, he said. You believed it because it was easier than asking. A pause. You trusted the wrong person. Rexton's eyes snapped back to the old man. Your mother, Walter said quietly. And the room shifted deeper, harder, because this was no longer a dramatic speech. This was an accusation. Specific. Documented. And she told you Jade was gone. She arranged everything. The paperwork. The service. The silence. Walter's voice remained even. What she didn't tell you was that Jade was alive. The words landed without drama, which somehow made them heavier. She was removed from your life, Walter said, before she could tell you what she had found. Rexton's voice came out low and sharp. What did she find? Walter looked at him directly. Records. Transactions routed through companies that didn't officially exist. Properties transferred under names that led nowhere. Money that belonged to your father's original partnership, redirected quietly over years into private accounts. Rexton felt his heartbeat in his palms. She came to me, Walter said, because she didn't know who else to trust. And who are you? Rexton asked, because now that question mattered more than anything. Walter's expression shifted. Just slightly. I told you, I once lived in a house like this. A pause. 8 years ago, I was your father's business partner. The second shock. Bigger than the first. Because Rexton's father had died years before any of this. And everything connected to that era had been sealed, organized, and filed away by one person. Noreen, his mother. Walter continued. When your father died, she took control of everything. And when Jade found the truth, his eyes didn't leave Rexton. Your mother made sure she couldn't tell you. A pause. She didn't harm her. She erased her. Made you believe she was gone, so you would never go looking. The room was completely frozen. And Rexton's mind was running hard now, connecting things that had never connected before. The sealed casket. His mother's efficiency. The documents he had never personally verified. The way she had answered every question before he could fully form it. Where is she? He said. And this time his voice cracked open just slightly. Walter watched him for a moment, then said simply, the same place she's been for 8 years, waiting for you to finally ask that question. Rexton was already moving. The city lights blurred past him. He didn't remember leaving the room. He remembered the sound of his own breathing and one thought, repeating, "She's alive." The neighborhood grew quieter as he drove deeper into it. Narrower streets, older houses, the kind of place where time moved at a different pace, where people stayed and things were remembered. At the end of one street, he stopped. The house was smaller than he remembered. The paint was worn. The porch step was still broken. A wind chime moved faintly in the night air, and there was a light on inside. He pushed open the gate, walked to the door, knocked once, soft, uncertain. Silence. Long enough to make him think he was wrong. Long enough to make him consider turning back. Then footsteps. Slow. Approaching. The door opened, and Rexton felt the ground drop beneath him. Because the woman standing there was Jade. Older. Her face carried years he hadn't been there for. But her eyes the same. Unmistakably the same. She looked at him. Neither of them spoke. 8 years of silence stood between them. 8 years of absence. Of questions. Of a life that had continued without him knowing. "You're alive," he said, and the words felt useless. Obvious. Nowhere near enough. Jade didn't smile. Didn't cry. "I never died," she said. For words. And they cut deeper than everything Walter had said at the microphone. Rexton took a step forward. "I was told." He stopped himself, because saying it out loud suddenly felt like the stupidest thing he had ever done. Jade's voice was calm, not cruel, just honest. "You believed what you were told," she said, "and you didn't ask." The silence that followed was the most honest thing he had felt in years. "Why didn't you find a way to reach me?" he asked. Jade looked at him for a long moment. "Come back to what?" she said quietly. "A man who never came looking?" He had no answer for that, because she was right. She stepped back and opened the door wider. "If you're going to stand there," she said, "at least come inside." He stepped in. The house smelled warm. Lived in. It didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like a life that had continued without him, and that realization landed harder than anything else. His eyes moved across the room. A table, a bookshelf, a blanket on the couch, and on the floor near the hallway, a small toy truck. His breath stopped. That didn't belong to the past. "Jade," he said slowly, and then a small figure appeared in the hallway. A boy, 7, maybe 8, standing still, watching Rexton with careful eyes. Eyes that were familiar, in a way that made Rexton's chest collapse. The boy looked at Jade. "Mom," he said softly. "Who is that?" That single word, "Mom," hit Rexton somewhere he hadn't felt anything in years. Jade didn't answer immediately. She looked at Rexton first. And in that look, there was a choice being offered. One he hadn't earned. But she was giving it anyway. "What's his name?" Rexton asked, his voice barely holding. Jade looked at him for a long second. "Colt." Rexton nodded slowly. The name settled into him. Something that had always existed but never been spoken. He crouched down to Colt's eye level. His voice quieter now. Less polished. More human. "My name is Rexton," he said. Colt studied him. "Okay," he said, waiting. Rexton's throat tightened. But he didn't look away. "I think I'm your father." The room went absolutely still. Colt blinked once. Looked at Jade. Then back at Rexton. "What does that mean?" he asked. And that simple question cut deeper than anything else. Because it showed exactly what had been missed. Not just time, but meaning. Not just years, but him. Jade knelt beside Colt, her voice gentle. "It means he helped bring you into this world," she said. Colt thought about it, then looked back at Rexton. "Then why wasn't he here?" The silence that followed was the heaviest thing in the room. Jade didn't answer for him. She let the question sit. "Because it belonged there." Rexton exhaled. "Because I didn't know," he said. "I was told your mom had died. Someone lied to me." Colt frowned. "But she didn't die." "No," Rexton said. "She didn't." Colt thought about that for a moment. "So someone lied to you and you just believed them?" Rexton looked at him. "Yes." Colt wrinkled his nose. "That's not very smart." And something happened in Rexton's chest. Not a laugh exactly. Just a release. A small, painful exhale at the absolute honesty of a child who hadn't yet learned to soften truth. Jade watched them both, her expression softer, but not open. Not yet. You could have looked, she said quietly. I know, Rexton said. I should have. 3 words, and they carried more weight than his entire empire. Jade nodded, not forgiving, just acknowledging. Colt looked between them, then asked, Are you going to stay? Rexton looked at Jade, then back at Colt. Yes, he said, if you'll let me. Colt considered that seriously, the way children do when they sense something important. Then he nodded. Once. Small. But real. Rexton didn't sleep. He sat in that house while Jade and Colt rested in the next room, and he let the night dismantle everything he thought he had built. By early morning, he stood outside with his phone in his hand, staring at a number he hadn't called in weeks. Noreen. He pressed call. 1 ring. 2. Nathan, she answered, then corrected herself smoothly. Rexton. I was wondering when you'd call. He didn't greet her. Where is Jade's death certificate? A pause. Small. But enough. Why are you asking that? Her voice stayed smooth. Because she's not dead, he said. The silence that followed was longer. And in that silence, he heard 8 years of carefully constructed lies begin to crack. Where are you? She asked. You lied to me, he said, and the words felt strange in his mouth. Not because they were wrong, but because he had never once aimed them at her. You don't understand the situation, she said. Then explain it. Come home, she said. We'll talk properly. He looked back at the house behind him, at the warm light still on in the window. No, he said. I'll come to the estate, and we'll talk there. He ended the call before she could respond. The drive back to the estate was different from the night before. Not chaotic. Focused. Like everything that had been scattered for years had suddenly aligned into a single point. When he arrived, Noreen was already waiting in the main hall. Dressed. Composed. She always was. She turned as he walked in, her expression carrying the particular calm of someone who had never once been caught off guard. You shouldn't have gone there, she said. He walked toward her. How long? She tilted her head. How long what? How long have you been lying to me? She studied his face, measuring, then exhaled. 8 years. No denial. No hesitation. Just the truth, clean, direct. Like admitting a business decision. And somehow that was the worst version of it. Why? He asked. Her expression shifted, not to guilt, not to regret, but to something harder. Justification. Because she was going to destroy everything. Everything I built, he said. She shook her head. Everything your father built. Everything I protected. By erasing her, he said. By making me believe she was dead. She stepped forward, voice lowering. By doing what was necessary. Elena, Jade. She found transactions she didn't understand. Records from the early years. She was going to expose them. And when she did, you wouldn't have just lost money. You would have lost everything. Your name. Your future. Rexton held her gaze. So you decided for me. I protected you, she said. You controlled me, he replied. And you told yourself there was no difference. A silence. Heavy. Final. She gestured around the room. The mansion, the wealth, the perfection she had curated. And look where it brought you, she said. Everything you have exists because of the choices I made. Rexton didn't look around. Didn't acknowledge any of it. And everything I lost, he said quietly, exists because of them too. She didn't respond, because that was the one thing she couldn't redirect. He stepped closer. You're going to sign everything over. The records, the accounts, the properties connected to what you hid. Every transfer, every shell company, every document you thought no one would ever find. Her expression hardened. And if I don't? Then I expose it all, he said. Publicly, legally, everything, including what you did to Jade. The room went still. She looked away, just briefly, the first time he had ever seen her look away first. Then slowly, she walked to the table, picked up a pen, and for a moment she simply held it, weighing something invisible, something that had no good outcome left. Then she signed. One document, then another, then another. Rexton watched, not with satisfaction, Not with victory, with clarity, because this wasn't about winning. It was about ending something that should have ended years ago. When she finished, she set the pen down carefully. "It's done," she said. He picked up the folder, closed it, and then he walked to the door without looking back. Not at the mansion, not at her, not at a single thing he was leaving behind, because for the first time in 8 years, he knew exactly where he was going. The drive back was quiet. When he stepped inside the small house, Jade was at the table. Colt was beside her, drawing something on a piece of paper, tongue pressed slightly between his teeth in concentration. They both looked up. "It's over," Rexton said. "She signed everything. It's all being corrected." Jade held his gaze for a long moment, searching, making sure those words were real this time. Then something in her shoulders lowered just slightly. Not completely, but enough to show that something had shifted. Colt looked up from his drawing. "Does that mean you're staying?" Rexton looked at him. "Yes." Colt nodded once, like that was all he needed to know, then went back to his drawing. And in that simplicity, in that small, uncomplicated nod, Rexton felt something he hadn't felt since before the Empire. Before the towers and the deals and the controlled rooms. He felt like a person. Jade stood and walked toward him, stopped just in front of him. "This doesn't fix everything," she said. "I know," he said. "It's going to take time. I know." A pause. Then she nodded. Not forgiveness. Not yet. Just a door opened the smallest amount. And for now, that was enough. Rexton looked down at Colt. At the drawing taking shape on the paper. A house, a car, 3 stick figures standing outside. He didn't ask whose idea it was. He already knew. And in that small, quiet room, far from the mansion, far from the estate, far from everything he had spent 8 years building, something that had been broken for a long time finally, slowly began to come back together. The man who walked into that party as a joke turned out to be the only person in the room brave enough to tell the truth. And the man who invited him in as entertainment walked out of his own life and into the one he should have been living all along.